So, good morning and good afternoon, good evening, good night for those of you getting ready for sleep around the world. And I'm happy to be here. It's starting to get dark here in the morning, and coming down here on the bike, it's kind of cool to come down in the almost dark. So if you go for a long walk, maybe a long hike, with shoes that are way too small for your feet, and after a while, if your feet start hurting quite a bit, the problem is not with the walking, the problem is with the shoes. A huge part of human suffering comes from how people think. And perhaps the problem is not so much the thinking, but rather the clinging to thinking, rather the shoes into which we put the thinking. And if the clinging, the contraction, the craving, that with which we think, that is what contributes to suffering. That's where we lose our freedom. And so an important part of mindfulness of thinking is not only looking at thinking itself in all the ways we've looked at it this week, but rather also to look at our relationship to thinking, in particular the ways that we cling, the ways that what Buddhism would call attachment. And this can be, really clear, addictive thinking that we really can't let go of. But as meditation gets deeper and deeper, even something seemingly as innocent as interest, I'm really interested in this, is a kind of clinging that keeps us glued, attached to the thinking. So part of meditation, part of mindfulness, is to start becoming attuned or sensitive to all the things, all the ways in which we are clinging or attached to, globbed onto, glued onto our thinking. And for that purpose is not necessarily to know the content of what you're thinking, but rather the shoe it fits into, the way we hold it. So maybe in this meditation that can be part of what we focus on. So to begin, and gently close your eyes. And one of the ways to use thinking as a support for meditation is when you begin a session of meditation to think instructions for yourself, to kind of review the basic instructions that you use, and so give yourself a little guided meditation rather than letting your thinking do whatever it wants to do. Bring it along. Get it to cooperate with what you're trying to do and meditate. And for a minute or two, you can quietly, peacefully give yourself instructions. It's a very intentional use of thinking. And as you do so, let your thinking become meditative in nature, calm, relaxed, easy with what's happening. So I will do it this morning, and you can just go along with it, or you could quietly repeat it to yourself so that you can get a little sense of what it's like to give yourself instructions and thereby harness your thinking to kind of start really being here in the present moment. taking a few moments to adjust your posture. Looking to see how you can have a little more alert posture. Could let your attention travel up the spine. Perhaps there's very small adjustments in the spine that makes the spine feel more alert. All the way up to the last vertebrae where it meets the skull. Sometimes creating a little space between the vertebrae and the skull by tipping the head down a little bit and lifting the crown of the head slightly. It can bring a little bit more presence. Take a few long, slow, deep breaths. Settle in as you exhale. Relax the body as you exhale. Softening the belly. Letting the breathing return to normal. And for a little bit longer, see where the body you might relax, soften. If there are other concerns and thoughts that are pulling you away, can you feel the pressure or the contractions, the pull associated with this thinking? Tightening anywhere in the body. And as you exhale, to relax that pressure and pull, tightness. And then in a simple, kind way, center attention on the body breathing. Discover where breathing, the body's experience of breathing, is most available as the home base, the home for attention. And for a little while here, you might see what it's like to trust the experience of breathing. For this time, entrust yourself, as it's the most useful and helpful thing to do, is just breathe with attention. Accompany your body breathing. And then you might now bring mindfulness to thinking. If you don't think, you might be welcome to go back to your breathing. But if thinking arises, don't let go of it. Bring a kind, calm attention to notice, to be mindful of the thinking. And if some of the instructions from the week were helpful, see if you can be mindful not so much of not the content, but the process, the activity of thinking. The sensations of the body that are associated, the emotions that are associated. where the thinking is occurring. Explore the qualities, characteristics of the activity of thinking. And if you, as you're looking at thinking, associated with that thinking, is there any sense of that you're interested, some part of you is interested in the thoughts, fascinated, attracted to them? There's the interest associated with fear and anxiety. Is there desire associated with thinking? The thinkings represent something that you want or don't want. Are you somehow troubled by your thoughts? Maybe even repelled a little bit, pulling? Or do you have ideas that you should be thinking or you shouldn't be thinking? So these are all attitudes or reasons why we might be caught up in or involved with thinking. And it's possible to feel then how much we're involved with our thoughts. Are we all in, completely involved, and it's the most important thing that's happening in the moment is our thinking? Or are we easygoing and we're thinking, but we could hardly care less what we're thinking about? And in noticing this, is there anything that could be called clinging to thoughts, clinging to thinking? A contraction, a pulling, a pressure to think? Some insistence to be thinking? A compulsion to think? And that compulsion or insistence or the strong pull, it's possible to bring mindfulness to that, to bring simple, calm awareness of compulsion, the drivenness of thinking. Some of that has to do with the strength of wanting, the strength of not wanting, that is feeding the way we're involved with or reacting to thinking. And then as you breathe, perhaps you can soften, relax, let go of anything that might be called clinging to thinking. Any of that attitude that's fueling the thinking. Any of the physical sensations that are part of that drive to think. Or the emotions that are part of the drive to think. Relax, soften, release the drive to think. And to whatever degree there's an absence of clinging, appreciate that absence. And let the breathing, experience of breathing, fill that absent space. And as we come to the end of this sitting, to use whatever we've learned about not clinging to thoughts when we're involved with other people, when we're thinking about them or in conversations with them in which we're also thinking, or when we're helping and supporting and serving other people. What would it be like to be involved and relate to people, help people in this world without any compulsion around thinking, without any drive or attachment to our thoughts, including our attachments and clinging to being of service and to help, to allow our thoughts to arise and pass freely, to be able to choose which thoughts to allow and not allow. And may it be in the freedom of our mind, without any compulsion or sense of obligation, obligation which involves some clinging or pressure. Choose to live for the welfare and happiness of others. Choose to think about how to serve and help and be helpful or supportive, loving or caring for others. May it be that our care and compassion arises from a place of non-clinging, non-attachment, so that when we are concerned for the welfare and happiness of all beings, we have also taken care of our own happiness, the happiness that comes from not clinging, the absence of the suffering of attachment. May all beings be free of attachment. May all beings be free of the contraction and suffering of clinging. May all beings be happy from the absence of suffering. May all beings be free. And may this wish of ours float widely and far out on the winds of non-attachment, the winds of non-clinging. So this is the fifth of the 5 talks on mindfulness of thinking. And to end this series with the idea of freedom in relationship to thinking, or to use another language for it, to begin to appreciate the possibility of thinking without clinging. And this is possible, and in fact it's a very important part of the path of Buddhism, There are times it seems that the primary clinging that people have is to thinking, is to the ideas and concepts that are part of thinking. The and this is fascinating that many times when people are clinging to something, they're actually not clinging to the thing, they're clinging to their thoughts about those things. So if I'm thinking about something I really want, I'm really attached to have for lunch later today, and I made an almond butter sandwich, and I like almond butter, so maybe I'm sitting here clinging. I can't wait. It's lunch. I want lunch. I want to go make sure no one takes my lunch from the refrigerator. This is, I'm really attached to my sandwich. But um, but the sandwich is somewhere else, and what I'm clinging to are my thoughts about the sandwich. I'm thinking about. I'm attached to the pleasure maybe that it'll bring. I'm attached to the nourishment I think I might get. Attached to the delightful experience of having lunch and eating. It's the thoughts, ideas, the fantasies, the projections, the plans, anticipations, the anticipatory thoughts. That's what I'm clinging to, and the subject of those clinging, of those thoughts, is the sandwich, but what I'm clinging to is only thoughts. The only thing that exists is thoughts. And it's really fascinating sometimes if you pay attention to this, and to realize you're clinging to some idea of something you thought was real, and it turns out it's not there at all. Maybe I forgot that I made I forgot, and maybe yesterday I had an almond butter sandwich, and I thought, well, I probably did it today, so I'm clinging to this almond butter sandwich that I, think is real and sitting in the refrigerator, but it turns out that what I actually have is leftover dinner for lunch today. And I forgot, so I was clinging to something that kind of didn't exist. And so then it's really clear that the clinging was only to thinking and thoughts. We cling to stories, we cling to opinions, we cling to the past memories, we cling to our plans. There's a drive, a push, an attitude of importance, a strong interest, a fascination, a pressure and glue that keeps us bound to our thoughts. And it can be very intense. And I think anyone who meditates for a while can begin appreciating how strong the pull or the pressure or the drive is to be thinking at times. And sometimes it's almost impossible to let go of the thoughts because it's so intense. And that's a time when it's particularly interesting to study this nature, the feeling, the texture of clinging, is when your thoughts are just going a mile a minute and just out of control, just like this, can't stop it, the compulsion to think, the pressure to think. And because then you kind of begin really sensing and feeling into what that's like, not the content of the thoughts, but what that drive is like. How's your body activated? What sensations and muscles in your body are alive and maybe contracted or tight or hot or energized? What's happening emotionally, and how strong are those emotions that seem to be feeding and fueling that thought? And to really pay attention to all that, and then eventually finding your way to seeing, oh, there's something here that the Buddhists call clinging or attachment. There's a holding on, a grasping. There's maybe even comes with a little sense of desperation at times, or insistence, or entitlement, or horror. There's a kind of a negative attachment of being repelled, being troubled, and trying to push away. And oddly enough, the Our aversion to thinking is sometimes the very thing that is where the attachment is, and it keeps the thinking going. The more we don't like it, the more we're kind of actually feeding it. And so we start looking at what is this attachment? What is this clinging? As meditation gets quieter and quieter, and the mind maybe starts thinking in a quieter way, and just a few thoughts might arise, there too you might start discovering that there's something more than just the ideas of the thoughts, the content of the thinking. There's also a little bit of push, a pressure, something going on. When meditation is really, really calm and peaceful, it's fascinating to watch when there's very little thoughts, maybe gaps in thinking, and you can feel sometimes the initial little bit of pressure or a little bit of activation that indicates a thought is about to happen. But if you're really mindful and you can really see that little activation, sometimes it just dissolves right there. And you'll never know what you were going to think. And this is a fascinating thing that the underlying, there's almost like a subconscious or unconscious beginning of thought before they come into consciousness. So who's responsible for what you think then? If it's happening from your unconscious, and you didn't choose it, your conscious self didn't choose what you thought. But if something deeper is happening, and so there's something deeper always going on with thinking. It kind of begins off stage, I guess, in a sense. But by feeling into the experience, into the emotions, the sensations, the impulse, and the drive, the push, the pressure that might be there, we begin dropping down into the deeper and deeper sources of where thinking begins. Maybe we can't get to some primary source in the unconscious, but we get to this place where we can feel it and sense what's really deeper than the content. And this is probably one of the important aspects of really following the path of liberation, is we don't want to be so, in meditation, as meditation deepens, we don't want to be so involved in the content or caught in it. We're really looking to let the mind become quiet and clear enough to begin seeing the deeper operating system, deeper things operating there. And one of the deeper things is clinging, is grasping, this pressure, drivenness, craving, a drive to do something or want something or push something away. It's very, very simple, but simple doesn't mean that it's unimportant. It's really at the heart of this, much of what makes us, the mind and our psychology tick and work, is this what the Buddhists will call craving and clinging. And one of the primary clingings is attachment to ideas, stories, thoughts, and all that. So we're not really asked in the end to let go of the thoughts. We're asked in practice to let go of the clinging to the thoughts. And then it's fascinating also because if there's no clinging or compulsion to think, and we give the thoughts our freedom, there's this delightful freedom where the thoughts just have space, have room, they float, they become thinner, they become lighter, and they kind of vanish. I find it delightful to let go of the clinging to thoughts. There's a kind of deep, kind of not kind of spontaneous sense of delight, even sometimes something that borders on amusement in bringing mindfulness to thinking and letting go of the clinging to thoughts. The compulsion to think, for me, I associated with a narrowing of attention, a narrowing contraction, an involvement with something. And when I can let go of that clinging that creates that narrowness, the narrowness goes away, and there's a sense of openness, or spaciousness, or expansiveness. And there's something with that movement from narrow contraction to spaciousness that I just find delightful and a little bit amusing, and it's just a happy thing to do that. And then to discover how to think, how to allow the mind to think freely, not to be troubled by thoughts. We can become friends of our thinking. We can have a friendly relationship to thoughts and let the thoughts move through lightly and easily and creatively. To be able to engage in thoughts in rich and valuable ways, thinking is an important part of human life. And to be able to do it creatively and intelligently, wisely, to look at thoughts carefully, to be able to um, relate to thoughts wisely, and not believe every thought, but also know how to think things out and reflect on things in deep ways, and not kind of act on the first initial opinion we have. There's a rich world of thinking that becomes possible when we've lightened up our relationship to thoughts, when we hold our thoughts lightly and we are spacious around them in a certain kind of way, forgiving, accepting of them, not necessarily accepting of the content of thought, but if we just let the whole process to be there freely, let it operate and move through us, then we have much more freedom around our thoughts, and our wisdom can help us decide, no, I don't have to be involved in that. Oh, that's a good thought. I think I'll continue that. Or maybe I need to think, maybe it'd be good to think about something else today. Maybe it'd be nice for me to think about something useful and helpful for the world. And so rather than just kind of floating passively on the winds of the mind, winds of thought, whatever the mind is thinking, with freedom, with less and less clinging to thoughts, we actually become more and more the guide, the supporters, the wise tenders, shepherds of our thoughts. And may it be that through this meditation practice over time, you discover the great joy of non-clinging, the great joy of not clinging to thoughts, and the way that allows your thinking to become wise. May you be a wise thinker who develops a friendly relationship with your thinking and your thinking with you. So thank you so much for listening and being part of this, and I look forward to coming back again on Monday.